I often get asked how I set up Visual Studio, including what theme do I use, what extensions do I use, and how I configure the options. Often, people think that I have installed additional features because my Visual Studio has a quality of life upgrade that theirs does not seem to have. In this video, I'm going to show you the 30 plus changes that I have made to Visual Studio to make it work better for me. I believe that every developer should learn how their IDE works in order to make themselves more efficient. Knowing what's available also allows you to make a more informed decision about changing IDEs. Now, this video is a standalone training video that will teach you a specific coding topic. Every Monday, I provide videos like this. On Thursdays, I release a podcast video that covers the topics that software developers need to know that don't include writing code. If you're looking for sequential training on a topic with real-world focus, you can check out iamtimcorey.com, where I have dozens of courses meant to prepare you to be a software developer. If you're just getting started, check out the master courses. Those courses are designed to start you at the beginning and get you job ready by the end. Okay, let's jump over to Visual Studio. And here I have a basic setup. Okay, there's nothing crazy about this. In fact, I kept the default name. So Console App 6 and Console App 1 are my two projects in this application. And what we're going to do is kind of browse through my Visual Studio setup, and you can compare it to yours and see what things might sound interesting to you based upon how I describe them. Okay, but let's start off with my extensions. I want to make sure that we're clear about how I use extensions. So let's go to installed. Now, my extensions is going to look a little bit different than yours probably. We'll get to how to get this nicer view, which right now, because of my font size, isn't as great of a view as it could be. They're working on this. Is actually a preview feature that you can have too in your version of Visual Studio, not just the pre-release version of Visual Studio. This is actually, let's go look real quick. Just to be clear here, I'm using Visual Studio Community Edition 2022 version 17.9.2. That's the version I am using. So there's nothing preview here as far as Visual Studio itself. This is the latest release as of the recording of this video. So Extension Manager, again, it's a bit different than yours, but don't worry about that. Let's focus in on the extensions that I have installed. Now, the first I want to talk about, most of these are from Microsoft. Notice Microsoft here, and then down here, we've got Microsoft, 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 and so on. There's a bunch of Microsoft extensions that we're not going to cover because those are just coming out of the box or they're part of whatever package I install with Visual Studio. They're just, kind of the defaults. But let's talk about, first of all, Font Sizer. This is one that Mads Christensen has built that actually was from a previous version that was no longer on the internet. He's able to fork the repo and make some tweaks to it. This is Font Sizer. And this, I think, is one of the biggest things that Visual Studio is missing. And it's one that I really, really needed in order to teach on YouTube. Because what it allows you to do is change the font sizes very, very quickly for Visual Studio in general. So you have editor font sizes and environment font sizes. And you can make both of those larger or smaller with just a few clicks of your mouse. It makes it a whole lot easier. For example, if you were to go to Tools, Options, and then go to Environment and look at fonts and colors, there is a section in here for changing font sizes. But notice Show Settings for, there's all the different places you could change things. And then in there, you can make specific changes to that specific thing. I think that's a lot. And trying to change all of these one by one and figure out what works and what doesn't work was just overwhelming. This is the kind of the downside sometimes of Microsoft is they provide every option, which makes it overwhelming to choose simply. You have to choose per section or per item. And that's, like I said, it gets overwhelming. So Font Sizer is the one extension I use because I teach on YouTube and I want to have a larger font so you can more easily read it. So that's one I use. You don't have to use. You can just, use a default font or even zoom a particular window in or out. But for me, that's one. The other one is GitHub Copilot. There's actually a couple of them here. Copilot Chat and Copilot chat services. So GitHub Copilot I use a lot. I love Copilot. I think that there's some really great things that come with it. They're still in the early phases of getting this thing working right, where it doesn't kind of step on your toes. And I've turned it off for a few videos because it's been noisy. But when you're working with Copilot and building applications, not just teaching, but building applications, it makes you a lot faster. So Copilot and Copilot Chat integrated into Visual Studio is really helpful. You do have to have a subscription to Copilot. Copilot's not free. There's a 30-day free trial, but after that, you have to pay for it. This is where you can get the AI to help you rename something. I showed that in a previous video. That comes from Copilot Chat. So there's some really cool stuff there. But that's it. Those are my extensions. Now I have one more, Elma. We'll cover that in a future video. I use Elma personally for some of my logging and visualizing some of my logging. So I have an extension for seeing it right in Visual Studio. Again, we'll cover Elma later. If you want more information, we'll do a future video on Elma. But yeah, that's it. So the rest of the stuff's from Microsoft. It's all just the basics that come with Visual Studio. So when you're talking about extensions, I don't have a ton. I don't go extension crazy, and part of the reason why is because I don't want to show off a heavy dependency on third-party packages that might not be there when you watch the video. I depended on Font Sizer, and then the owner pulled it off of the internet, basically. It was almost entirely gone. So I actually had to reach out to Mads and say, hey, can you help me here? But having those dependencies can be rough. And I don't want you to feel like Visual Studio isn't enough. That's also why I use Visual Studio Community Edition. I want to show you that you can do you can do everything you need to do as a developer in the free version of Visual Studio. You don't have to have the paid version of Pro and Enterprise. Those are more for businesses who need to pay for a business license. So with that, those are the extensions. But let's talk now about actually tweaking Visual Studio itself. And the way I do that is to go to Tools, Options. In here is everything you need to do to modify Visual Studio. There's lots of stuff in here. You may have never even gone through and changed anything or very few things. I would encourage you to go through and read all of these and just see what options are here, because you may find options that are, that work better for you. Now, again, because I've used that font sizer and changed the font sizes, Visual Studio is not really thrilled with changes to font sizes in certain areas. The options dialog is one of those areas where it can get really messy. So there'll be some spots in here where it's hard to read. I'll walk you through it. It shouldn't be hard to read on yours, but because I changed my font sizes so dramatically for video, it makes it a little harder to read. Okay, so the first thing I do is I change to dark mode. Okay, this is built in. This is a built-in theme. I don't use a third-party theme. I just use the dark mode from Microsoft for Visual Studio. And the question comes up often, well, can you use light mode? I prefer light mode. I want to see light mode in your videos. Maybe it's better for your eyes. There's a little bit of both. There's, some people are heavily in the light mode camp. Some are heavily in the dark mode camp. And in both camps, there are people who can't use the other. So I can't do both for a video. And so what I have chosen is when I do presentations in front of people, meaning I have a projector, I use light mode because light mode is easier to read on a projector. But when I do videos for YouTube, I use dark mode. And the reason why is because there's less light glaring out of the screen at you. And in general, it helps more people. So that's why I choose dark mode, but there is a reason why some people prefer light mode and some people need to have light mode. So for you, you get to choose which one you want to do here, but that's what I choose. Now there's other things in here. We're gonna skip right down to the preview features. This is where you get to try new things out and see if you like it or not, and you can figure out if you want to use the old way of doing things or a new way of doing things. I'm going to just touch on two things in here that One of them is very, very new, and that is the Extension Manager UI refresh, the thing you just saw before that probably looked different than yours. And that's because I checked this box here for Extension Manager UI refresh. This is the new Extension Manager. It's in preview. They're still working on it. They're still making tweaks to it. They're still, taking feedback. I actually sent some feedback in about the layouts, especially the larger font sizes, because giving feedback is important, because that's how you get things changed and that's how you let them know that things need to be changed. But I'm using the new Extension Manager UI refresh because I do really like it. It's just some tweaks have to be made to it. Okay, the other thing that I have checked down here is the pull request. Okay, enable creating a pull request from within Visual Studio IDE. So within Visual Studio, I can create a pull request on my GitHub repo without having to leave Visual Studio. Now, there's also a new feature where there's a link now that also says, hey, do you want to make this pull request on the web? Meaning you click the link and it will go to the web in the right location for you to create a pull request right in GitHub. So you can do either one. You can do it through Visual Studio or through the web, but I like this feature, having that option of creating a pull request right inside of Visual Studio. So those are the two that are the primary things I have changed. I did also change the use the preview Windows Form out of Process Designer for .NET apps. I don't do Windows Form development a lot, but when I do use the preview out of Process Designer. Okay, but those are the big two, and one bonus one there. Let's move on now to the tabs and windows. All right, this is where you get to tweak how you want to see the tabs at the top of the window. So one of the things that I do for tabs and windows is I show tabs in multiple rows. So if you have lots of different tabs, you can either have them scroll or you can have them show in multiple rows. And so I choose multiple rows. Really, if you get into multiple rows of tabs, you might have too many tabs open. But we all probably have 30 tabs open in Chrome or in Edge. So I understand, but at the same time, maybe calm that down. So when you start scrolling, that's when you go, hey, maybe I should close some of these. But that's what I do. I also set the tab layout to be top, not the left or right. The reason why is because I am more often pressed for horizontal space than vertical space. And the reason for me is because of the fact I have my font size set so high for YouTube that even 80 characters is the width or wider than the width of my screen. But for you, it may make sense to move your tab layout to the left, because then you could have tabs down the sideline, which means a lot more tabs would fit in one row. All right, so that's one of the things I do. And then down here in the, here we go, colorize document tabs by project. This is another thing I do that I've asked for some tweaks on, and we'll see if they come about or not. But what happens is it will now colorize the tabs based upon which project they're in. This can be very, very helpful. Let me just show you real quick how these things work. So first of all, I have two program.cs documents. Notice that this one is this yellow and over here is a pink. So this tells me which project they're in based upon the color. And therefore, if I had, let's just say test 1, test 2, test 3, and so on. Let's copy and paste this, actually. We're going to create a lot of these. 6, 5, 4, and let's just do test 7. Okay, there we go. So creating all of my tabs, notice we have multiple lines here because we now have more than enough for one row. So now you have 2 rows, but notice how all the yellow ones are in the same project, and then there's a red one that's for a different project. And in fact, if we were to add, let's just add some here. Test 1, 2, and 3, like so. So now, even if they're mixed, you can tell, oh, that's the red project, which is console 1, and the yellow project is console 6. So the one tweak I've asked for is that they would color the actual project so I know which color references to what project. That's one tweak I've asked for, but this allows me to associate. So when I see test 2, I know, oh, that's associated with console 1, not with console 6, even though there is a test 2 in there as well. So tab colorization helps, and so does this wrapping of the tabs. So back over here, if I were to not show tabs in multiple rows, well, then I get this, and I have this little indicator here. So I could scroll and see more, but then I have to scroll back up. So there's different ways of using this, but I just put it on both lines. That way it's just easier to see, and I kind of know that I should be doing this. Okay, I should be closing some things down if I have multiple rows. Okay, so that is colorizing the tabs and also showing tabs in multiple rows. Now let's go down to the projects and solutions main section. And in here, we're going to go to general, which is actually the first thing. When you highlight the actual name, the root level name, it also highlights the first section. So it's the same section. Okay, so in here, the first thing is we have the track active item in Solution Explorer. Notice if we select, say, test 4, notice how down here on the right, test 4 is highlighted. If I go over to test 1, it moves the cursor up. And that way, even if I have something collapsed and I go to test 2 in the console 1 app, it goes right to it and highlights it. That way, I always know which file on the right in the Solution Explorer hierarchy, which file I'm working on because it highlights it. That way I can see, oh, I'm in the wrong project. I actually mean test 2 in the console app 6 project. Just another nice visual to know where you're at in your process. Okay, I have unchecked the show output window when build starts. I have found that when I want to see it, I can open it up, but more often than not, I'm ignoring it. Therefore, I unchecked the box to show the output window when it starts. Next, the reopen documents on solution load right here. This allows you to, if you have all these documents open and you close the solution, you will reopen the solution, it opens all these documents again. That way you can pick up where you left off. And also with that, restore Solution Explorer project hierarchy state on solution load. So if you have things expanded on the right and then you close out the project and reopen it, this will restore that hierarchy state, meaning things that are open or things that are closed, and kind of your layout. These two checkboxes allow you to get back in the action. So if you close out Visual Studio and you reopen it, it's where you left off. And so you kind of pick right back up and keep going. That's really helpful for reducing the time to get started again on working your project. So those are the two things I have tweaked to make sure that I can get back into it when I restart. So those are the 4 changes in the general section that I do. Now let's ignore all the rest. And you can poke through it if you want. There's some fun stuff in here, but let's go down here to, let's go to text editor. And let's start in text editor general. So again, here's where this cutoff mode because of the size of my font. So sorry about that, but that's just, something we deal with. Okay. So in general, we have the cut or copy the current line without selecting. So this third option here. And what this allows me to do is if I am, on line 5, but I had not selected anything, and I say Control X, the whole line goes away. I come down here, Control V, and I've pasted it back in. So it has cut that line out because I was anywhere on the line and just hit Control X, or Control C would copy it. So this allows me to not have to highlight the whole thing and make sure I didn't, accidentally miss one character or something like that. I can just be on the line somewhere and then use my Control C or Control X to copy or cut. All right, so that's one of the tweaks that I make in the text editor general section. Next up, the enable mouse click to perform go to definition. So right down here, this is the option right here, enable mouse click to perform go to definition. And notice the use modifier key is Control Alt or Control plus Alt. I use Control. So if we were to reference, let's just say in test 2, let's reference test 6. So we're going to say something like test 6. Sure, test 6 equals new test, right? And we can say Control and click on test 6 and go right to test 6. So back in test 2 again, we could select it and hit F12 and go to it. But if we're on there, I can just select or use Control key and click on it and go right to it. It makes things a little faster when I am researching what's going on inside my solution. I can bounce around to the various definitions quite quickly. Okay, so that is, I use the Control key for that, but enable mouse click to perform go to definition. All right, next up is this section right here. I'll move it to the top, sticky scroll. I love sticky scroll. Sticky scroll is pretty awesome. And what it allows you to do is when you have nested curly braces, it allows you to see where you're at even if you scroll past the top. And for me, the maximum lines is 5. I know it's cut off there. And I prefer the inner scopes. So prefer inner scope means if we have more than 5 nests, then we stop at 5, and the 6th one, we add the 6th one on and drop off the first one. So outer scope would be the first 5, doesn't matter after that, we're only the first 5. So let's just see this in action. So if we were to put a whole bunch of, sure, this is a test class. And we're going to copy and paste this a few times. In fact, I'll take all of this and we're going to paste it a few times. Notice now I have up here that I'm in namespace console app. I'm internal class text 6. When I scroll down, I can still see on namespace console app internal class test 6, even though that's on line 9 and I'm on line 13, 25, 30, 31. It still knows where I'm at. This is really helpful when you're inside of a method, inside of an if statement, and you want to make sure you know what the if statement said at the beginning or something like that. So super helpful there. I really like sticky scroll. And again, it doesn't take up too many lines, especially if you tweak that to work best for you. So I have 5 lines, which is 5 levels of indent. That's a lot. If you say, you know what? I have that many, but I don't really want to see all of them. I just want to see the last 2 or the last 1. No problem. You can do that. You can just change this number to say, 1. And if you said 1, well, then notice it just says internal class test 6, even though I'm in the namespace console app, because of the fact that we only have 1 level of indent that we're worried about. So it's up to you to figure out how much you want to tweak it, and the more lines you add, well, then the larger it would take up on the top of your screen. As you can see here, we've got 2 rows of tabs. Now you've got 2 lines up to 5 lines of indent. This could get pretty heavy on the top half of our screen, which means we don't have as much space to write stuff out. So you have to start thinking through, how do I protect my screen real estate? And part of that might be saying, you know what, I'm going to close out some of these tabs because I don't need to have all of them. Look at how much more space I have. So, and then you might say, you know what, I only want 2 lines of sticky scroll, not all 5, because that's just too many. And that would make life even better for you. So some cool stuff you can do, but you make sure you don't go crazy here and just make your editor unusable. That's kind of on you at that point though. So that's sticky scroll. Also down here in the display section, there's a couple we want to talk about. First of all, enable brace pair colorization. This is the 1, 2, 3, 4th one down for me. Enable brace pair colorization. This is where if you look, there's a yellow curly brace on line 8, and there's a blue curly brace on line 10. Come down here on line 66, there's a blue curly brace, and then a yellow curly brace, because they match up. They pair up, so you know, oh, I was looking for the blue open curly brace, therefore this closes out that class. So because it's a matching color. And you can tweak those colors if there's a problem with color blindness or certain color blindness that you need to avoid certain colors. It's all customizable. So that's one that I play around with, the enable brace pair colorization. The other one is the automatically surround selections when typing quotes or brackets. So this is one I just showed recently in a video, but where you highlight a word or something in here, you can put double quotes around it. You press double quotes once and it puts it on both sides. You can highlight something and put parentheses around it. You can highlight something and put square or curly braces around it. You can put square brackets around it. You can put single quotes around it. There's a lot of different things you can do. You can also do the angle brackets. There we go. So lots of different things you can do here by just hitting the opening one on whatever is highlighted. It doesn't really matter what's highlighted. It's not going to care. It's just going to wrap it in whatever you've asked it to. So it will put the closing whatever based upon whatever you use for the opening. So if you put double quotes to begin with, it's going to end with double quotes. And yes, if you were to highlight a double quote and hit double quotes, it's going to not do anything because it says, hey, you know what? You probably didn't mean to do that. You're probably just replacing that. So there are some things like that. But if you were to highlight, this part where there's a double quote inside, it doesn't care. It's not going to escape that out, or that's for you to do. All you've asked for is put double quotes around this. So just note that there's some limitations there that you have to think through and make sure that you're not trying to do something, that it's not meant to do. How about that? So back to our tweaking of Visual Studio. That's our text editor general section. There's those 5 changes in there. Let's come down here to code cleanup inside text editor. And again, there's this cutoff drop down, but we have to choose profile 1 or profile 2. What's this for? Well, select code cleanup on save profile. I've chosen profile 1. And then I've checked the box, run code cleanup profile on save. That means when I hit save, it's going to run profile 1 for code cleanup. So down here, we've got code cleanup, this little icon right down here in Visual Studio. That's a little broom icon with a drop down. If you do the drop down, you've got the run profile 1 or profile 2 or configure code cleanup. You configure code cleanup, and then you could make some changes to, in this case, profile 1 or profile 2. So profile 1, for me, they're both the same. But we have the ability to remove unnecessary imports or using, apply file header preferences, sort imports or using, and format document. We also have other available fixes. You could, add accessibility modifiers, apply unused value preferences, remove unnecessary casts. Lots of stuff you could do automatically if you wanted to. And you just bump that up into the included fixes for either of the profiles. And then you can either run it automatically, or you can come down here and say, run profile 2 or run profile 1. So, running profile 1, notice it changed all my namespaces, so they were up there and now they're gone. So let me undo that. But if I hit save, they're gone because I automatically run my cleanup on save. So that might not be what you want. And if that's the case, then uncheck the box, but know that you could then come down here. Let's undo this. You come down here and say run profile 1 manually and do the same thing. So it's up to you. note that it's not going to clean up the files you're not in. So I was not in this one, so I save it now, and now it changes. Okay, so it didn't change. Test 7. Test 7 still has our unused using directives. So it's only the file that you're in that it actually makes those changes to. Okay, so that's the code cleanup on safe. Now, let's come down here to C#. So we're in the text editor section under C#, and we're going to start in the general section. And what we're going to do is we're going to add the line numbers. This is typically selected anymore, but it's not always a default. So just go and check, especially if you're upgrading Visual Studio from version to version to version. Then what happens is it can actually import your settings from previous versions. Microsoft really does not want to mess with your flow. So if you are doing something a certain way and an upgrade changes how that thing works, they don't want to turn that on for you, because then you might think that that's now how you have to do things. Like, you didn't like line numbers, so you didn't have them on, then you upgrade Visual Studio, and now line numbers are turned on by default. That's not how Microsoft tries to do things. They try to allow you to turn them on as you want them. Therefore, there's a lot of settings in here you may have missed, including maybe line numbers. I always want line numbers on, always, because line numbers allow me to, when I have an error, to go right to that particular spot. So line numbers on is an important one. Now notice I'm in the C# section, but come up here to the all languages general. There's a line numbers section here too. All languages applies to everything. So this will apply a default to all languages, and then you can further refine it in the language specific areas down below. So in my case, I have chosen that line numbers, yes, that gets a check mark for always. Now note that some of these have a dash in them. Let's zoom in here so you can see more easily. This one right here has a dash in it because of the fact that it's not a always selection. So some allow us, some don't, same with the other ones. So if you wanted to apply to everything, you can come in here to all languages in general, but we're working on the C# general, and we're enabling line numbers. Word wrap, you could do that, and I might do that at some point for my videos, just because of the fact that it's often hard to put a full line together when my font size is so large. But if you are typically working on this and you don't have your font quite as large as mine is, well, then you might have a problem if you're wrapping your lines around. So I would encourage you to try and keep your line width to 80 or less. So word wrap's not going to help you in that case, again, unless you have your font size a bit larger like mine is. By the way, notice that mine's actually at 82%. There's 100%. Sorry, I just noticed that. So that's the only thing I have really changed. So let's move on out of this and go to the scroll bar section. This is where I have selections that maybe you might want to change. Maybe you didn't even know these existed. So first of all, yes, show horizontal scroll bar and vertical scroll bar. These are either available or not. I have them both enabled because, yeah, sometimes I scroll horizontally, even though I don't want to. And of course, I scroll vertically all the time. So, but then there's the show annotations over vertical scroll bar. If you notice, there's this white line right now on this line, and that's probably because I made a change of some kind. So you can show changes, you can show marks, you can show errors, you can show caret position. It's probably just the caret position is what it probably is. But you can also, for example, if we were to notice that now we've got this yellow outline here because I've made a change I haven't saved yet. And I can, put I just paste these in. Notice how large it is because of the fact that this is a more significant change, multiple lines. I hit save on this, and now It's green down here, indicating that these are the newly saved lines. There's also a green section up at the top. Why is that? Because we took out a bunch of lines that were using directives. So you can see that my one change, if we undo this change, notice that those using directives are there now, and it's saying, hey, they're here, but they're unnecessary. So I can hit save, and they're gone. So this allows me to see where I might have made a change. And if you're in a very large file, you can go right-click on it and go right to that spot where a change line or a line change has been made, so that it's more easy to navigate inside of your file. So that's how I do it. However, there is other options in here if you want. I use the bar mode for vertical scroll bar, but you can use the map mode for vertical scroll bar, and it can show preview tooltips. Okay, so this is what the map looks like. You can actually highlight over it and see the lines of code. Now there's not much code in this file, so there's not much to read here, but what allows me to do is say, okay, I want to jump right down to this spot right here. And if you zoom in, you can see like there's a curly brace and there's another one, they're tiny. And you might say, it's hard to read this stuff. Yes, but you mouse over something and you get the full view. So you can actually see, oh, there's a closing curly braces there. And if you're wanting to go to that spot, you can just highlight it and then click on it. And away you go. You're put the page at that spot. Now, it's not scrolling a whole lot because of the fact that this is a very small file. And I remember where I made those large changes to, right there. If I want to go down to this bottom double, this is a test, I can click on it and there I am. I can come up to this one up here and there I am. Like, it's very easy to go, the top of the file, there I am. So the map mode can be really helpful for a scroll bar instead of trying to just do the bar and look at the dashes or the dots here. Notice the blue here is for this blue squiggly. Yeah, it's a spelling error. Interesting that it highlights this one but not others because we say class all over. But this map mode can be really helpful. I don't typically use it. I typically use the bar mode because I'm more interested in having the horizontal space again for YouTube. But when it comes to my own development, I often turn that on. Okay, so let's go back to tools, options. And in here, we're on scroll bars. Let's move down and look at tabs. This is where you can set tabs or spaces. And we can have that war over which is more important. I've done a whole video on that. And the basic conclusion is, for accessibility purposes, tabs are probably better. As far as preferences go, I like spaces. And so I don't do a whole lot of development in fact, I don't do any development where my team needs a certain accessibility standard for it. So therefore, I don't have to be concerned with that. My team is very small. In fact, right now it's just me. We're actually hiring somebody right now to add to my team. But what that means is that I've set mine to smart, which a tab is 4. So it indents 4. Okay, a tab is 4, and an indent style is 4, and we insert spaces. So even though I hit the tab key, we insert spaces. Okay, so what that means is that these right here, that's 2 indents. But yeah, at the same time, if you look at my cursor, I can go 1, 2, 3, 4. There's 4 spaces. So if I really wanted to and say, hey, I want to have 2 spaces per tab manually, I can just delete those 4. And now I have 1, 2, 3, 4 because I have 2 indents. Or you could say, well, if I just want 1 indent, well, that's what it looked like. So for you might say 4 spaces is way too much because I really like the idea of having more horizontal space. No problem. You come up here and go to Tools Options and go say, you know what? I want to see 3 and 3. Hit OK. If I hit Save, it's going to move it all in to 3 spaces for each. So now I have 1, 2, 3 spaces for 1 indent. So That's smart tabs. That's what I use. But again, if you want better accessibility, maybe you make those into tabs, not spaces. So one tab is one indent. It's up to you and your process and your team and what works best for you. So that is the tab mode. And let's go to Tools, Options again. And under Text Editor, C#, what we're going to do is scroll down here to the Advanced. Okay, now in Advanced, there's a couple of things we want to do. We want to look for using directives. Let's come down here, and we have a whole section called Using Directives. And in here, I want to add missing using directives on paste. So right down here, the bottom one, add missing using directives on paste. What this does is if you, let's say you're looking at Stack Overflow or maybe an example from, ChatGPT, and it gives you an example that uses a NuGet package or just a using directive, maybe a console write line, which uses system. Well, we have system already, but other using directives that you need to add. Well, when you paste it in, it will add the using directive for you. So let's see this example of this, program.cs. If you don't know, program.cs does not have really a namespace that we can see. So normally when we had program.cs where we had the namespace and we had the class, well, then it was in the root namespace, console app1 namespace. But if we want to reference something with console app1, for example, calling test1 or test2, in fact, let's test2 down here. Let's change this to 2. I want to use this code because I want to copy it. So I've got code, but I'm going to reference this test2. Anyways, so I'm going to go over to program.cs. I'm going to use this, but there's no using directive at the top. Notice line 1 is that code comment. Line 2 is console write line. There is nothing else. If I hit paste here, now we have a using directive on line 2 for console app1 because it said, I know what you're probably thinking. You're probably thinking console app1, and so therefore that's what we've got. Cool. Now that allows me to put in using directives where it knows what it should be or what it thinks it should be. But let's change this to 6 real quick. Let's cut this out. And I'm going to paste this in. And it says using static system.net MIME media type names. That's not right. So sometimes it gets it wrong because I'm thinking, well, I want it to be, console app6.test6. But remember, we don't have a reference from or in console app1 to console app6. Now here's a trick here. If you click on console app1, click and hold, and then drag it up on a dependencies for console app1. Now, if you go look in project references, you'll see that console app6 is checked. So by dragging it up, you've added that dependency. So now let's paste it in again, and it still can't figure it out. Okay, so sometimes it will have problems. Let's do this again. Let's close this out and try it again. And it goes, no, I don't know what we're talking about here. So then you have to say, okay, I actually want this to be, I want to add the using directive to console app2, which it's not finding here either. So that's why you come up here and actually put it in manually. Using console app 2. Oops, I'm sorry, 6. There we go. And it's inaccessible. So that's because it's internal. And that may have caused us problems as well. So let's come back over here. This now works, but let's get rid of this. Let's cut this out and let's paste it in again. And there we go. Now it figures it out. So sometimes it's going to be quirky, like we saw with the MIME type. But sometimes it's because you did something wrong. And like I did with it was internal instead of public. But making it public allowed the system then to find that and figure out, oh, you wanted the using directive for console app 6. So that's a really helpful feature, especially when you're pulling code from, like I said, Stack Overflow or other external sources, where you copy something, you paste it in, and a lot of times on Stack Overflow, people don't mention, oh, you have to add a using directive for, system.data or system.data.sql or whatever it might be. And so you paste it in, it's going to give you a best guess of what it thinks the using directives might be. It's not perfect, but it's pretty good. So that's a nice feature to have, is to add those missing using directives. Okay. We also have this section right down here. Keep going. Inline hints. Okay. I like inline hints. And one of the things I like that people often miss is the this third checkbox, display inline parameter name hints. So this shows us things that, notice line 6 of my code here. It says console write line. That says value, colon, and then we've got the hello world. Where did value come from? Well, that's the parameter name, and we get that from this checkbox right here, display inline parameter name hints. So that's a hint. That way, when you create, let's just create a method inside of class 6. So I'll say public void run me string first name string last name, like so. There you go. So there's the run me in test 6. We come over here to program. We already have a test 6. We can say test 6.run me, and let's just pass John Doe in. But now it says first name is John, last name is Doe. That's really helpful sometimes, especially when people do things in a way that doesn't seem logical. For example, maybe they change these two around, last name and first name. So then you come back over here to program.cs, and its last name is John, first name is Doe. That kind of leaps off the page at you as, wait, that's not right. First name is probably not Doe. It's not Doe John. It's John Doe. Therefore, we've got this backwards. We need to fix that. And that's where those inline hints can be really helpful. So tools, options, text editor, C#, advanced, and in the inline hint section, the display inline parameter name hints. And below that's a bunch of different options for when to suppress them, when to show them, and how you can tweak that. I've left the defaults here, I believe, for those checkboxes, but just note that you can play with those if you don't want them for new expressions, or if you don't want them for literals, or if you want them for everything else, for indexers and so on. It's up to you. Okay, so next up we have code style in the C# section again. So code style, and in here we have naming. And so what I have done is added one new entry to this. You probably have 3 entries. I have 4. And the last one is this private or internal field. And I have set up _start, which you probably don't have that either. So I did, as I said, manage specifications. And then we have specifications here. Whoops, not specifications, sorry. But there's private or internal field. Manage naming styles. I have _start. So I added this. I hit the little plus button here to add it, but we'll edit this one. That's the one I've added. And in here, let's make this larger. I have the name of it _start. And the required prefix is underscore, and that's it. And then I said that the capitalization is camel case. So it shows me what it's going to look like. This is what my private fields will look like. So I added that new one. I selected that for the required style. I made a suggestion, and we're done. How does this help me? Well, let's come over here to, test 5. And we're going to create a constructor. And let's say we're passing in a iLogger, which I don't think we have. So I'm going to install the package for Microsoft extensions.logging.abstractions. Cool. So I'm going to say iLogger of type test5. We're going to say logger, right? So, by the way, control dot to add the using directive now. Okay, so now I have as iLogger test5, whatever it comes from dependency injection, whatever it is, doesn't matter. This is just an example. Well, I want to have us available then to all of my subsequent methods inside of this class. So I hit control dot and I say create and assign field underscore logger. Notice it uses underscore logger. If I did not have that custom option in my naming section for private or internal field, then what would happen is it would create the same name. It would be logger. It would do this dot logger and make it logger like that. That may be what yours does because that's the defaults. But I didn't like that. I wanted it to be underscore logger. Therefore, I changed that setting in the naming convention and said for private or internal fields, I want it to be an underscore start, and that's just a suggestion. But that way, when the tooling creates a private or internal field, it will use an underscore for the naming convention. So that's why mine looks like that. So underscore logger as opposed to having the same name. Okay, so back here under Tools Options, that's the change I made in naming. Next up, we're going to go to still in C#. So still in text editor, C#, now IntelliSense. And IntelliSense is your friend. So the one that was not checked for me, and there may be others in here that I have changed differently. I believe the only one that I have changed is this second one, show completion list after a character is deleted. So we show a completion list after a character is typed, but let me show you this. So let's go back over here to program.cs, and we're going to write console dot, and notice how right line's at the top, and I start typing W, and now I've got the W options and WR, now there's the different WR options, and it's given that my two options plus, of course, the one that is a suggestion based upon most commonly used, which is why you have a duplicate. But the checkbox that I checked allows me to see this list on delete. Let's say you accidentally click off, go, oh, rats. Or maybe WR is not the right one. Maybe you want something else. You hit back one space and that shows up again. So you don't have to hit Control J, which does bring that list back up, but you don't have to do that. You can just backspace one or forward space one. So it's WIN. There we go. We can make our selection from here, but we go, oh, it's not Windows top, back up one, and now it's Windows height. Okay, so you get to see that list even when you're backspacing or deleting something. So if you mistype a character, you don't have to remember Control J to bring that list back up. So that's the one tweak in IntelliSense that I made. Again, IntelliSense is a great feature. Okay, let's close out of the text editor and go to debugging. Inside of debugging, there's one tweak I want to make sure is turned on for you, and that is I enable everything here. So enable hot reload and edit continue when debugging, enable hot reload when starting without debugging, enable hot reload on file save. This last one is one that I really love. If you've not used hot reload, it's especially useful on the web, but also mobile. So what you're doing here is, let's say you're building a Blazor application and you launch the page and it looks great. And then you notice you have a typo and you go, oh, rats. And so you go make the change to the typo and then it pops up and says, hey, we got to restart this application in order to show this. And you have to go right back to the right page, and that takes time. But with hot reload, you make the change to the typo, you hit save, because this last option right here, hot reload on file save, you hit save, and that change is automatically shown on the page without reloading everything. That's hot reload. They are making it better and better all the time. At first, it would only do hot reload in very small, minimal cases, and now it's most cases you can do hot reload. Yes, there are times when you've made such a significant change that either you change something to the startup of that page or you change something to the structure of the code that's just too significant. It will take a full reload. But a lot of times you can do hot reload to do a lot of development without having to have that shut down and restart and go back to the right spot loop. Okay, so that's hot reload. Now with that, there's also XAML hot reload down here at the bottom, still in debugging. I enable XAML hot reload. So again, for everything, especially for MAUI, super helpful because sometimes in MAUI, things just don't launch very fast. So when you're an Android emulator, it just doesn't seem to load that fast when you have changes. So having hot reload is really helpful because you can kind of get your application close, load it up into MAUI in the preview like simulator, and then just use hot reload so that when you make changes, it just changes in the simulator. It doesn't have to reload everything and restart everything. Okay, so that also notice apply XAML hot reload on document save or the hot reload button. I always want it on document save because I want to see those changes right away. You might not want that if you make changes where you make some changes in one spot and some changes in another spot and you save in between. That might cause problems. Or if you have save automatically happening after a certain timer, well, then you might not have a complete change, which might crash the application because it's not a complete change and there's a problem. Therefore, you'd uncheck this box for on document save. Again, the same thing is true with the .NET C++ hot reload up here. If that's the case, you might not want to have the on file save. Okay, the other thing is, this is a personal preference, but when I launch a WPF application, there's a little in-app toolbar that pops up that I don't love. I don't want to see it because it's not really true to what my application is going to look like when it's running. So I have unchecked the enable in-app toolbar in the common section. That just makes sure that toolbar isn't there when my application starts. So that's the other thing that I do to tweak in this section. And the last change that I make to Visual Studio, I come down here to the GitHub section, and under Copilot Chat, I have this checkbox right in the middle here that says enable rename suggestions. It's the third one from the bottom right now. There'll be more that come in here over time, I'm sure. But this enable rename suggestions, I did a video on that and how when you rename something, it will allow you to, it'll give you some better suggestions for names using AI. So the way this works is I might not like this, and so I use the rename dialog, and there's a little icon on the right here. I click this, and it says, hey, based upon context, you might use test instance or test object or test runner or test6 instance or test6 object. These are all generated by GitHub Copilot Chat and trying to figure out what I'm trying to do here. Now, in my case, it's looking at the context and saying, hey, this is a test object. It's not something that, has, a great name in the first place, but we can't give a great name for it, but we have some options that might work. Like maybe you're going to do a test instance here and just try something out. And so it's giving me 5 different options. It doesn't always give me the best options, but what I like about it is the fact that it gives me something to work off of. Something where I go, test runner's not quite right, but maybe I could say test runner 6 because that might be exactly what I'm looking for. And so it allows me to have a starting point for a new name rather than just a blank canvas. Because sometimes when you're staring at a blank canvas going, what should I name this? It's a little more confusing than if you say, hey, here's 5 options. They're all horrible. Okay, yeah, but what do you not like about them? What are you looking for? And it kind of helps you dial in on more of what you're looking for. So it's a great kind of pair programmer here for helping us name things. And that's the last of my 30 plus changes. There's a lot there. my last of my changes to Visual Studio in order to, make it look better. Notice that, there's some things that I like here that maybe you don't. Maybe you want to change things, like you want this vertical vertical scroll bar to be that map mode, or maybe you don't like the wrapping here. Lots of different options for you to choose from as far as how Visual Studio is configured. But the bottom line here is knowing how this tool works and knowing all the different possibilities for how it could work will allow you to really dial in exactly how to work with your process and with the way your mind thinks and the way that you do certain things in order to be the most efficient possible. There's a lot of efficiency things in this app that might or might not work for you, but choosing which ones do work will allow you to write better code faster. So I encourage you to check these out. That's what I do, and that's how I configure Visual Studio. And it's always changing. There's some things that are more recent in here, and I may change more things in the future. I will change more things in the future as I learn about more things or as newer tweaks come out to Visual Studio. So keep on top of it. I would encourage you not to go down the route of lots of extensions. I've seen a lot of people say, well, my Visual Studio is so slow, but you have a bunch of extensions running. And are those extensions necessary, or do they do similar things to what's already in Visual Studio? Because there's a lot already in Visual Studio. Maybe those extensions aren't necessary. So I would encourage you not to have a ton of extensions. Choose specifically ones that give you specific benefits that you know for sure, I really want this benefit and it's worth the added overhead of the startup time. Okay? Extensions are great and they can be very helpful. Just don't go crazy without really good reasons to use them. All right, that's it. Thanks for watching. And as always, I am Tim Corey.